Amanda, Shandy, and Colleen. My name is Colleen.
My name is Amanda.
And I'm Shandy.
Welcome, everybody, to the show. We are here to talk about Season 2, Episode 2 of Big Little Lies called Telltale Hearts. How's it going, everybody?
Lovely.
Good.
Awesome. What did everybody think about the episode?
I loved it.
It was
very excited to talk about it.
Yeah, it was a lot. I liked it a lot better than episode 1 for sure. I feel like it started to lay some groundwork for actual stories and like things that are going to happen in the season.
Oh, yeah.
So that was fun.
Definitely. And it was also just like interesting to continue to go a little bit deeper into everyone's reaction and to see sort of like the fallout and just how everyone's dealing with the fact that like there was this really traumatic thing last season. And I don't know, also like some of the relationships between some of the characters, like I just really, really loved. And we saw these close relationships between certain women last season, but I just loved this season how it's like, okay, so there are those close relationships that were established, but like we're also creating like new close relationships, either because of trauma or because of just like craziness or just for whatever reason. But it's really exciting to see some of those characters interact who didn't necessarily interact a ton last season. And I'm loving it.
Yes.
Yeah, for anybody who said last week's episode was a bit slower, set-up-y, this episode was intense and pretty much took off running. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was like a use of waves to kind of separate some of the big emotional moments.
Yes.
And I feel like that was a perfect like bit of symbolism for what this episode was, is that it kind of came in and everybody's world just got like smashed up against the rocks like the waves.
Yeah, no, Colleen, it's interesting you bring that up because I had a note about water and oceans and stuff as well. And I think at the moment it feels a little crackpot, but I feel like water and the ocean and the aquarium is going to play into some big thing at the end of this season. And because I noticed, and it really sort of crystallized for me, the whole visions thing with the water. But then it made me realize the whole new opening sequence. It's all fish, it's all ocean, it's all the things that were clips from the gala. Mm-hmm. That was in the show open of season 1. It's now all been replaced by water.
Very interesting. I mean, when you guys were saying that, like, I was thinking about the aquarium and, like, I was thinking about how they had said that in season 2 they wanted to film more locally because they filmed obviously a bit locally in season 1, but they wanted to do more of that. Yeah. And so the whole fact that, like, Jane works at the aquarium, we talked a little bit about last week, which, like, whatever, like, job skills aside, for me, that was like a way that they're like very much integrating the Monterey community into the series. But like you're saying, maybe there's actually more to it than that. Even the
there is.
that you just talked about, Amanda, like for me, that was like, oh, they're like, this is a very Monterey scene. I mean, I know there are aquariums everywhere, but like the Monterey Bay Aquarium is really world renowned and like Jane works there and whatever. So it's like sort of a symbol for Monterey. But I think that you guys are correct that maybe it's more than just that, but it's very conveniently also just a local symbol. So like, yeah, maybe like I didn't pick up on it like that, and so maybe your average viewer doesn't pick up on it like that. Maybe it will come into something more later. It's really interesting.
I'm calling it now. I feel like there's going to be some sort of big scene that happens towards the end of the season with the aquarium.
I agree.
And you know what? They like did film at the aquarium straight up. And so that's an interesting thing because like they could have still had Jane working at the aquarium and have her wear the aquarium, polo and everything, and not have to actually film that at the aquarium. But I do remember them talking about how they closed down the aquarium for a day or however long it was.
And they did scenes there.
And they filmed there. So it's like at the time I was not like, whatever, they're filming at the aquarium. But like you're saying now, I'm like starting to think like, oh, maybe you're right. Like maybe there was more to that. Maybe there will be more consequential scenes than just like, the sort of backdrop that could be anywhere.
Right. Well, it's going to be really, I guess, interesting to see if this theory pans out, because I love it, and I think that we're right, Amanda, and we should just, place our bets.
Yep, there we go. Crackpot theory. I'm calling it now.
Well, I'm totally team Amanda and Colleen right now.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Before we move on to a little bit more in-depth discussion, I did want to point out that we have a new theme song. And
it's awesome.
Yes, thank you. So shout out to my husband Jay for putting that together for us. We debuted it for the people that watched the live episode of the broadcast, the other podcast that we do, last week. After we stopped recording, we played it for whoever was there, and I think it was well received, and I love it. So thank you so much, Jay, because it's awesome, and we love it, and we really appreciate it. So yay, and hope everybody out there likes it too. And then one other announcement is we are putting on our feed, which is in iTunes, so please go and subscribe to it so you don't miss an episode. And maybe if you're there, leave us a review. But we are now in iTunes. Broad Little Lies is the theme. The theme is the feed. So check us out. And I guess we're everywhere that you can get podcasts, because the feed is just out there in general. So you can go subscribe there. And we last season, apparently I can't speak. For season 1, we mentioned that we had done a standalone episode of our other podcast that talked about season 1, and that is also going to be on the feed as well. So if you want to go back and listen to what we said about season 1, it's your lucky day. So,
true story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Without further ado, now we can get into some more in-depth discussion of Big Little Lies, Telltale Hearts. Named for, I'm guessing it was named for the Edgar Allan Poe short story, right? Like the Telltale Heart?
Oh.
Because
probably.
The Telltale Heart is, according to Wikipedia, a story in which an unnamed narrator who endeavors to convince the reader of the narrator's sanity while simultaneously describing a murder that the narrator committed.
Oh, wow.
And isn't that with like the heartbeat from under the floor? Is that Telltale Heart?
Yes. Or is that the Raven? No, the Telltale Heart. Duh. Yes, you're right. Amanda. Yes, and he keeps hearing
that 7th grade English class. It's all coming back to me now.
Yeah, and according to Wikipedia, the old man with whom the narrator lives has a clouded, pale blue, vulture-like eye, which distresses the narrator so much that they plot to murder the old man, despite also insisting that they love the old man. The narrator insists their careful precision in committing the murder proves that the narrator cannot possibly be insane. So for 7 nights, the narrator opens the door of the old man's room in order to shine a sliver of light onto the evil eye. However, the old man's vulture eye is always closed, making it impossible to do the work. On the 8th night, the old man awakens after the narrator's hand slips and makes a noise, interrupting the narrator's nightly ritual. But the narrator does not draw back, and after some time decides to open the lantern. A single ray of light shines out and lands precisely on the evil eye. Hearing the old man's heart beating loudly and dangerously fast from terror, the narrator decides to strike, jumping out a loud yell and smothering the old man with his own bed. The narrator then dismembers the body, conceals the pieces under the floorboards, and ensues the concealment of all signs of the crime. Even so, blah, 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 blah. Confident that no one will find any evidence of the murder, the narrator brings... Okay, here's probably where we're coming back in on the relevance here. Confident that they will not find any evidence of the murder, the narrator brings chairs for them, and they sit in the old man's room on the very spot where the body is concealed and suspect nothing. The narrator begins to feel uncomfortable. That's where he hears the heartbeat of the old man coming from the floorboards and breaks down and confesses. So...
Well, all I'm thinking is as you're saying this, Fiona is right outside the door, like going crazy with meowing.
Fiona is Shandy's cat, for anybody who's playing along at home.
She's meowing very loudly.
Wait, I'm sorry. Is she meowing, or are you just hearing that?
Well, Amanda hears it too. So.
I hear it too. It's meowing from under. It's from under the floorboards.
Thank you.
I'm trying to convince you of it.
So anyway, I think that the narrator, hearing it and telling them to tear up the floorboards to, confessing is probably directly, is like what Bonnie was saying at the very end, where she goes, I wake up in a sweat at night. I think that it's going to get us. And, Madeline's like, ever the perceptive one. Who's going to get us? And she goes, the lie.
Right. It's the what and the who. It's like,
Honey, yeah.
Listen to the people.
Listen.
Side note, though, like we have learned, it's Madeline.
Yes, it is. Not Madeline.
Yes.
Not Madeline. That was a fun little level of just the story that I hadn't really picked up on that Tasia shared with us. It's from their Instagram page. So I think it's worth following the Big Little Lies Instagram. Reese Witherspoon did a video about how it's Madeline, not Madeline, but Renata, even in season 1, like refers to her as Madeline, which is like just a little like needling of like,
right.
Oh,
yeah. Like I love that. I know you kind of like well enough because our daughters go to school together, but I'm going to mispronounce your name.
Right. Because it's a power
on
move.
Purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
totally.
kind of like the equivalent of Mariah Carey saying, I don't know her about J-Lo, which is my favorite shade throwing of all time.
Exactly.
Right.
I will say though, on last episode, we went kind of back and forth and there was a question of how to pronounce Madeline's name. And that made me feel much better because it's like, okay, like we have heard it both ways. We're not crazy.
Yes.
Nice.
Madeline Martha McKenzie. Triple M.
So much name. So much alliteration.
Names. Okay.
So much name for such a small person.
I know. Speaking of short people, we can start with that, or we could talk about who I think was the breakout star of this episode, and that would be Renata Klein.
You mean that's I'm Not Gonna Not Be Rich, Renata Klein?
Oh, she had a great episode.
I'm not gonna not be rich.
I love that. I was talking about this with a friend, and the first episode, I really feel like the sort of like breakout quote was when Madeline is talking to her daughter and says, I don't care about homeless people. And definitely the sort of parallel breakout quote from this is Renata saying, I am not gonna be rich.
I'm
not gonna not be rich.
She said, I will not be rich.
I feel like that's one of those things that the writer is like, I'm going to write this because I know I have the most amazing actresses and they're just going to make this line sing.
Not even that. I honestly, it's a toss up for me between that line that Renata had and when she's driving away with her middle finger out the sunroof going,
my God,
will somebody give the woman a moment?
That was amazing.
I had to go back and rewatch because I couldn't see like what it was. I was like, is that like a cup on the top of the car? What is that?
No, that was super.
It's the bird.
Oh, that was
amazing. And I was going to save this for the local section, but I'll just say it now because it's not like really enough to talk about. As Renata's driving down that street and then that amazing scene, I'm watching with my friend Tasia, and we're like, is that like, girl? That looks like, oh yeah, that's General Jim Moore. Like, I don't know if it's a boulevard or an avenue or whatever, but we're like, oh yeah, like we know that street. We know exactly where you're driving.
That's awesome.
That's these, oh yeah, like we've totally, yeah.
It's kind of like,
not sure why she was on that side of town. Just gonna say, but,
right? It's a very different terrain from what we normally see for the show, but it worked so perfectly. It like so helped set the scene so well,
right? Which is definitely why there's whoever did their like scouting was like, okay, this part of the community doesn't really fit into the super rich white part of the community, but we're just going to use this street because it looks really good.
Yeah, it did look really good. But now you know how Amanda and I felt watching 30 Rock and recognizing like all of the local places that they had filmed.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Yep.
I had just never really like experienced that kind of thing before. And it's really fun.
Imagine how great it's going to be when you see yourself.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait.
And I will just leave my predictions for the local segment.
Yes. All right, so I guess we've gone down this Renata route, so let's go for it. She starts out the episode and like she's on top of the world. Her effing publicist has gotten her the cover spot, and you know her husband's not being a weirdo. And then that quickly changes because he gets arrested for securities fraud, etc., etc. And we also see, as he's getting hauled away, that Detective Quinlan has been following, or at least passes by. We also see Detective Quinlan a little bit later when she drives behind Bonnie and freaks her out. So do we think that there's anything to this Detective Quinlan theory that Renata has, that she's following them around and tipping them off to make their lives more miserable? Is she the beating heart?
I think that's at least what they want us to believe.
I was going to say, now that you've said that, yeah. I mean, I'm still wondering what's going on with that French au pair.
The French au pair?
Because Renata has a French au pair.
Oh, that's right.
And she mentioned her. She mentioned her in the first episode when Sheila was like calling her.
Yeah,
and she was like arriving, and so that was the other person that I was like, is she doing
one
something?
That's tipping off? It could
I don't know.
be.
But
she hasn't had any screen time yet this season, right? It's just she's just been a mention.
Yeah, she's just been a mention, but we met her last season. So that was one thing that stuck out to me. But I have to say, like, I love this whole Renata family drama.
Me too.
Like, oh yeah, you guys got yourselves into some white collar, like super major stuff. And even for that, it was like, so, okay, he's getting arrested by the FBI. And then, and this is maybe a question for our DP specialist, like, because Tasia and I are like, the building, I was like, where is that? So this is like, that's not in Monterey. But like, if the FBI arrests you, like, where do you go? Do you go to the Capitol? Like, is he in Sacramento? Is he in San Francisco? Because that's the nearest big city. Like, I don't know. Like, how does the court work when it's the FBI?
Well, I think it probably would depend, and this is just a guess here, is if there's not a local federal outpost of like the FBI, perhaps they go to the State Bureau of Investigation, like, and they kind of give them some room. I don't know where he would have been taken. My guess is, I mean, obviously he was appearing before federal court. Right?
I mean,
I believe it was federal.
Right?
It was FBI, so it would have had to be federal.
Yeah.
So he probably went to whatever circuit court was like in his jurisdiction, right?
That's got to be like San Francisco, right?
Probably. I mean, maybe that's why they were implying that they were driving back, you know, in the middle of nowhere, that they had a long drive.
Oh, and if they were driving back, then General Jim Moore, that would actually make sense that they were driving there.
There you go.
Oh.
Yeah.
Although and granted, I know nothing about white collar crime, but I do watch Orange is the New Black. And when you have the telephones, that's Max. Is that where they put the white collar criminals? Do they put them in maximum security?
Well, they're talking about millions of dollars, right?
Right.
I mean, that's a lot of money.
Well, if anybody knows the answer to this, please let us know. Send us an email, the Broadcasters3, that's the letter 3, the number 3. Hold on.
Or the letter, you know, whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, the
symbol, if you will.
The symbol.
Character.
The Arabic lettering. Yeah. At gmail.com. Before we even go down this rabbit hole and then get ourselves in trouble for giving like total wrong information, let's let the experts tell us.
Fair.
So anyway, Renata, she's having a bad day. And I kind of love that her husband was trying to soften the blow and be like, Amabella's money can't be touched. And she's like, I'm still going to be rich, damn it.
I will not be rich.
Well, and did we know this about Renata's character, that she like bootstraps, like was poor as a kid? Did we know this before this episode?
Honestly, it didn't seem surprising to me, but I mean, I could be getting my, you know, powerful characters mixed up in TV.
Right. It like made sense to the character, but I was like, did we know this before and I just wasn't paying attention or have forgotten?
I don't think so. My other question though is like, okay, so I get that they're married and it's like shared money, but like, doesn't she have like a high, like, it's gonna say like a high paying, high powered career, like couldn't she kind of like, okay, whatever money they have, like their assets are going to be seized now, but like maybe she could start over super comfortably still.
Right. I don't know how rich people's money works.
Yeah. I just know that Lori Loughlin's probably going to jail, so.
Right. I don't know how prenups factor in.
Yeah, but I do know that rich people money usually stays somewhat rich.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I can understand that maybe he will go to jail and all of her assets, including her house and her car and whatever, will be seized. But even when she starts back at zero, she still has her job. Especially if she divorces. At this point, like, isn't she going to divorce? At least on paper.
Right. What doesn't matter.
What she does is the bad press of your husband in lockup. Does that hurt her career too?
Right.
Like the notoriety and the infamy of it.
True.
Right.
I mean, what is her career?
She's the CEO of something big. I always assumed that she was the CEO of like a Facebook kind of show. A Facebook kind of
dealio.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of kept it vague. So it's just like, she's just powerful. She's big and bad.
Yeah.
That was hilarious though. And I do have to like think back to last episode when I can't remember who it was that said like, I hope that Renata has something big to do this season. Like, oh, there you go.
Oh, that's so funny.
I love me some Laura Dern.
Amanda said that because Jay actually said the exact same thing to me. He was like, well, didn't Amanda say last week that she was hoping for more Renata?
Love me some
there
Laura
you go.
Dern.
She gave them the quote of the episode.
She sure did. Both of them. But anyway, okay, so yeah, I think it's probably going to be tough from the public relations standpoint versus the money standpoint, and I don't know, she might have feelings for him somewhere in their standpoint, so about what to do. She couldn't totally leave him on the side of the road. She went back.
She did a quick U-turn, which is legal in the state of California.
Very nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
So anyway,
very safe.
Although maybe not on a highway. Although that's not a highway. It's just a very wide boulevard.
That was Renata's storyline. Ironically, I think she was the only person whose storyline did not involve her child in some form, because then we'll head over to Celeste, right? Celeste does the Ambien sleep driving.
What a way to start an episode, huh?
My God.
Yes, it was. What about that?
And what were those flashbacks?
So, okay, I think the flashbacks it's representing her struggling, where she had that scene with the therapist, and the therapist is telling her, like, you need to let go of the good parts of your marriage because that's not who your husband was.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase.
Okay,
this.
sorry.
Not the flashbacks with her and Perry. The flashbacks with the tattooed man that she seems to be fucking in a car.
Oh, I just assumed that was Perry.
Me too. Were
was
Perry.
Tattoos happening?
There were tattoos happening. Tasia was all over this. I just want to give credit where credit is due. Also, P.S. Tasia, please write into the podcast so that you can, get your due instead of
clearly.
No,
we
I'm
need
pretty
that
sure
good eye for the details.
I'm pretty sure that it was Perry because I watched it twice and did a lot of pausing to take notes, and I maybe was he wearing gloves? Maybe
I would need to rewatch it, but there were definitely tattoos going on, and I certainly can't imagine Perry having tattoos.
No, but I'm pretty sure it was his
we've
face.
We've seen a lot of Perry.
We would
know by
Perry.
now if he had some
big
tattoos hiding
back
there.
Tattoos.
We've seen all of Perry's front and all of Perry's back. So
we've seen what he's working with.
We've got full Skarsgård. So
we have. I mean, we've even seen a little bit below the belt. Just saying, but
yes,
in a very confusing scene.
Anyway, all right. So I'm gonna go off the assumption it was Perry, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Madeline.
Look at that. Tasia, write in and tell us more.
Yeah, so Celeste is just really struggling. She's got her mother-in-law who continues to be a complete psychopath. The boys are struggling. They're struggling at school. They're being more violent. The holy crap, that scene in the therapist's office was intense.
Yeah.
And then
again, I was like, okay, like I question her methods. Is this okay? I don't know. I am not a therapist. I don't know if it's okay, but like making your patient relive trauma, I don't know.
Well, and there's certain,
I think she had to relive it in order to
actor choices where it almost looked like the therapist is like getting gratification from
Okay, I
some
didn't
of
pick
these
up
like
on
outbursts. It's like the whole thing feels a little.
I didn't pick up on that at all. I thought she wanted her to confront it, so she relive it, so she could confront it and see it for what it was. It wasn't, it wasn't like foreplay. It was violence, and I think that's why she says to her, picture your friend. What would you do if it was your friend?
Right, and I do get that, but I've always felt a little uncomfortable about her methods, and I think the other thing that maybe like makes me double down on this is that from the very beginning, I have also felt like the therapist is very judgy, and like I feel like therapists aren't supposed to be like, they can be judgy in their head, but like they're not supposed to, right? Like,
no, I agree with you, and it almost feels as though, because Colleen, to your point, these scenes do hit all the right beats, and she's doing the right things, but just like the way they're being done is a little weird. So my thought is maybe like they maybe don't have like a therapist consultant on staff that is sort of helping to nuance those scenes and make them feel more legit to what a actual therapy session or a couples therapy session would work, or how that would look.
That's a really good point, because it's like a very specialized set of like behaviors and knowledge, and not just like something you can act. Although like if for any of the acting, I'm sure they like, for the domestic abuse, I'm sure like Nicole Kidman like researched that, and so it seems like maybe you're right, Amanda. Something like they just didn't sort of connect, or
right,
because it always feels a little bit off, and it's like, is it the actress? Is it the actual scene? Is it supposed to be that way? Is it just the way I'm interpreting it? I'm not sure, but I can sort of accept it and just move on. But every time I'm kind of like, I don't know.
Okay, well, Celeste goes way beyond that, though, in this episode, because not only does her mother-in-law, remain awful, she finds out that the boys know that they have a brother, and that the boys have told Mary Louise that they have a brother, and then Mary Louise wants to know, what did she say? Something like, would you do me the grace, or would you be so gracious as to tell me his name, or something like just all around snotty.
Well, just the fact that she like turned it on herself, like, how dare you keep my grandson from me? I think that was the line that like hit me the most. Like, psychopaths say what?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then she's got to tell the mother-in-law about the violence in her marriage, who then in turn pretty much tries to gaslight her and is like, I don't believe you. Like, clearly this was an affair and not a rapist, but she was lying anyway, because I'm sure she had multiple partners and there was a whole lot going on there. And then by the end of the episode, Celeste and Jane are introducing the brothers to each other. So, I mean, Celeste went through a lot in this episode.
Yeah, no, she definitely did. And I think like what season 1 did so well was to show domestic violence in maybe a more sometimes nuanced and realistic lens, where like you can see that Celeste loves Perry despite the domestic abuse. And I think that's often the situation, is like it's very, very complicated. And so it's not just like this simple black and white, big bad sort of, I mean, obviously the domestic abuser is bad, but like the reason, the question is always like, why did she stay? And there's so many reasons that she would stay, financial, whatever. But like one of them is also like, well, I mean, that's the person that you fell in love with. So like, it's very, very complicated. And I think that what season 2 is doing really well so far is showing sort of how victim blaming happens and how even women participate in this, with the mother being like, just like you said, Colleen, like, oh, well, she may have had multiple partners and she may have been drugged and how did she even know, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, I'm telling you that he beat me. And like Mary Louise is just saying, oh no, that didn't happen.
Right.
And like, I understand that she doesn't want to believe it because it's her son.
Right.
But like, that is for real.
Right.
And so she is believing her male son over her, living, surviving female daughter-in-law who's telling her lived experience and just being not
right.
believed.
And then let's not even how the whole conversation ends, where she's pretty much blackmailing her. Like, if you don't change your mind that it was assault, like, she's like, you left that out. You left that out. And, oh, you left that out too. Just.
Yeah.
I was kind of scared of Mary Louise by the end.
Yeah.
There's good reason for that, I think.
Yeah.
And, I mean, she's going to go, we've seen, like, she's going to go talk to the police and she's going to go talk to that investigator. And all I can think is that, like, again, if the police actually has any sort of empathy and sympathy for actual victims, like, you could understand, again, why certain things would be left out. Like, when you're talking to the police, like, why, like, oh, you were going to move out that night. Like, using that as an accusation, why did you leave that out? Well, maybe you didn't feel like telling the police that your husband beat you up.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And not to mention the fact that how is it, I mean, I guess I could see why the police would want to know that information, but like, how is it relevant to him slipping and accidentally falling? Well,
exactly. Especially like in the wake of like, you are just dealing with these super complicated emotions of you just saw your husband, like whatever your feelings were about your husband, you just saw him fall to his death.
Right.
So, but this is where the therapist could come back into play, like, and be very important in that, Celeste did confide in her, because the Mary Louise, like, very much had that, like, well, why didn't you call the police? And why didn't you do this? Why didn't you report it? And, like, of course, we know all the complicated reasons why she may not have done that, but at least she does have the police, and then she also has Madeline, who she did tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, the importance of like confiding in people if you can.
Right.
Right. Exactly. So let's pivot over to Jane and Ziggy, where Jane's whole world comes crashing down because all of a sudden, she finds out that Ziggy knows who his father is, and now she's got to go talk to him about it. And we have that heartbreaking scene where he's asked her like about being salted, and she's got to sit down and explain to him what assaulted means. And power to her that she was, honest with him without brushing it off, because we see Celeste is saying, no, your daddy was a wonderful, beautiful man. I mean, at some point they're going to grow up and realize that he wasn't, unless,
no. And at some point they will, but like, again, it's like age appropriate, what's age appropriate. And that's this is one of the things that I loved about this episode that I thought it did so well, is that like, it's super, super, super complicated, this whole familial situation. Mm-hmm. And so like, initially, like I was also glad that Jane sat down and talked to Ziggy. I was not expecting her to get into the assault thing, and I don't think that she would have, except that he had already heard it. And so at that point, it's like, okay, well, you have to correct what he heard and understood. And at that point, I'm sure she gave him, some sort of, as much as you can, age appropriate explanation for, what salted meant.
Right.
And so I think that's definitely super important. And she like set clear boundaries about like who needs to have this information, etc. Then you see Celeste, and that's another thing where it's like, well, you can't, okay, like these kids, like their dad just died, and people are complex, and like, yes, he was a terrible, like abusive person, but he was also their dad, and like they're like 7 years old. Like you can't be telling them that he was a terrible person who, like,
right.
They're already going through so much trauma. Exactly. It's hard to pile on so much more.
Right. And they have the right to remember the good times with him, and then when they're older, come to terms with the really bad, dark parts of him.
They have their whole life to go to therapy and work through those very complicated things that their little 7-8-year-old minds like just are not equipped to handle yet.
I thought it was. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and like, that's what I think that this episode did so well. And just to see them at the end, all 5 of them together, was just like, yes, like this is super messy and super complicated, but yet like, there's no reason why these 2 women can't be friends and like support each other. And that's so beautiful. And then like their kids can also grow up as like sort of like different kinds of brothers. And I just thought that was just really awesome to see.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just think this whole... Oh, sorry, Colleen, you go first.
Oh, no, go ahead.
yeah, I just think this was a really lots of great examples of motherhood. And how
that's what I wanted to bring up at the end.
Yep. You know, it's like Jane didn't have a ton to do this episode, but the one scene she did have was just so
powerful.
Hard. Like I, as the viewer, just sitting there thinking, like, how do you explain assault to an 8-year-old? Like, how do you do that? And I think I really loved that that's where they decided to end the scene and not to show us the viewer, because I think it's just too complicated that I think it would have been it's too big to get right. So I think doing it that way, and I'm sure they had all sorts of conversations in the background and in the writer's room and with
I'm sure they consulted. I'm sure they consulted child psychiatrists too about like the best way to approach something like that.
I mean, especially when it's the kid's father, like,
right?
He's explaining where he comes from, like,
right. Like it or not, that's like still half of him in a way. Like, natural to be curious.
And that's rough.
And I was just going to point out before when we were talking about, well, when Shandy was mentioning just the different ways that you talk to kids, I thought it was kind of interesting that, I mean, clearly Max and Josh are troubled right now, but it was interesting that Max, who seems to be the more, I guess, one that acts out more, called her out on it when she said, you know, and we're an open and honest family. And he just goes, yeah, I don't think we're that kind of family.
Yeah, I thought that was a great line.
That's calling out for help, I think. And, you know, saying, you know, you guys said it pretty great.
Yeah, but if we actually could circle back to the scene before that, when she picked them up from school.
Right.
Where they're in the classroom and the teacher's like, you know, this is a safe space. You can admit to everything. How does this teacher, how did no one tell him what was going on? Because clearly he was not expecting the reaction he got about, like, well, what if your dad dies? Like, that seemed to have caught him out of left field. And I'm sort of like, why would you have that there? Like, why would you let a teacher do something like that when they didn't know that all this very serious trauma happened? That seemed like a real oversight for me.
This was how I interpreted the scene. I assumed that he did know, but he'd never in a million years expected these kids that never talked about it publicly to respond like that. And really what he was doing was having the bullying discussion because, you know, Renata scared the shit out of him last episode.
Yeah, no, I had the same reaction. I thought, like Colleen, that like he probably knew about it, but they really hadn't said anything. And I wasn't even really thinking about the bullying. I was thinking that it was more like he's laying this down and like, so
safe
if these
space.
Kids who he knows are in distress ever do want to come and talk to him during recess or whatever, that like he's there for them. That's kind of how I took it. And that then when he was having the conversation with Celeste, that it was like, okay, so like, just so you know, they
that's
finally did speak out.
Yeah, that's kind of how I did it.
I would certainly
just
hope
felt super
that they
weird to me.
Right.
Well, it just really felt like it could have been done a little better. It like was not clear to me.
Okay, I don't know. I didn't have a problem with it, but let's pivot over to Bonnie here. Bonnie, we got a lot more of what she's thinking of right now. You know, Doug calls her mom, who very much does not like him. We get Bonnie is not happy to see her mother at all. Her mother is, you know, very what's the right word? Like she's into the crystals and talks about having visions. There's reference to her, you know, potentially having a drinking problem in the past. Bonnie's definitely not happy to see her there. And at one point, her mom asks her, what did you do? Or she said, what have you done this time? She also mentions certain things to Bonnie about where am I going here? Oh, I'm sorry. She talks about how you're surrounded by people who don't understand you. You like your walls. She makes that comment at the end. What'd you do this time? And the way that they kind of leave things is she goes up to Bonnie she creepily sneaks into Bonnie's room with the chicken bones and the crystals, right? Or whatever it is. And and like does this blessing over her, and then Bonnie, throws it out and is like, I don't want your shit, Mom. Sorry.
Yeah, and this is something where I kind of have an issue with because, and like, again, this is not a novel thought. It's definitely been talked about in the first season where we have this community that's like super white, and then we have like the one person of color who is the person who, ultimately kills Barry. The one person who like ultimately sort of like lashes out. And then we have the same person in season 2 who's like, I don't know, like her mother, is like doing some sort of like, is it Wicca? Is it like voodoo? Is it, there's something like sort of a very othering spirituality going on.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know. I was talking about this with Tasia right after the episode, again, right in. And she was saying, she doesn't have a problem with that because it sort of explains why Bonnie is like this free spirit and she's into yoga and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, like I get that. But the problem is, again, like when you have a token Black person in the TV show and they're the one that is like, has all of these different things put on them. Like if it was a more diverse TV show and there were like more than one African-American person, then like it wouldn't really raise such suspicion. But when it's like, oh, you just have the token one and they're also going to be the person who does the murder and they're also going to be the person whose family is like super into like this really sort of different, kind of tradition. It was just, for me, it was like a little bit like, I don't know. It raised a few. You
want to go on record as saying it made you uncomfortable.
Yeah. It was like, okay. I noticed it.
That's valid. That's valid. And perhaps my whiteness is showing that I didn't pick up on that on first watch, but hearing you say that 100%.
I remember I believe we brought this up for season 1 when we talked about it a little bit. Or I just read, a lot of opinions.
No, I think we did talk about it.
Yeah. But I think I meant more specifically applying to like the crystal and the like, I did.
Stuff. Yeah. It's just like, this is so out of left field that it's like, okay, why is it that like, okay, now we have the mother of the one Black character. And
it is just unnecessary. Like you just didn't need it. Like she's still a free spirit without her mom being.
See, I don't know if she's a free spirit because it seems to me when her mom is saying this isn't who you are, that perhaps she has adopted a different persona. Maybe there's more. There's more to it.
Yeah, maybe there's more to it. And like,
maybe she went to this town full of white people and was like, "This is what they expect me to be to blend in," because we do have the quote at the end. What have you done this time?
Well, and okay, no, that's definitely like an eyebrow raising quote. I do like the fact that if nothing else, the mother like addressed the fact that she's like in all white company. Yeah. So it's like at least like sort of an elephant in the room. It's been named like, yeah. Super white community. And to be fair, like that area is super white. But again, like one book spoiler, which I still haven't read, and I think this is inconsequential probably, so that's why I'm saying it. Apparently the character of Bonnie in the original book is white. So
really?
Oh.
Like I don't take that, like the whole thing happens in Australia and whatever, it's different demographics, but take that how you will. But anyway, that has been changed in the American adaptation, and I don't know. I don't know what that means. But
Jay was like, "This is a lost opportunity to get Lisa Bonet on this show."
Seriously, what is Lisa Bonet doing?
She's what is she doing? Jason Momoa,
bang her hot husband. I don't fall there for that. Get it, girl. But yeah, that would have been really the best, I think, if they could have gotten her to play Bonnie's mom. I really would have made me happy in the heart space.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, Shandy, that's totally valid and definitely worth further discussion if anybody wants to have it in the future as the season goes on. What do we think? Because I just shared with you what I thought Bonnie's deal kind of was, where she's trying to assimilate in by doing all these things to be unnoticed in a community where she would otherwise be noticed because something happened. And I'm curious if anybody has any theories, or maybe we'll just wait till it gets alluded to. I don't think she like killed anybody or something, because this is her pretty effed up. And, you know, you'd think if it was like your second murder, you probably wouldn't be.
You probably wouldn't be struggling with it quite so much.
Right, exactly.
Or maybe you would. I don't know. I haven't first or second murdered anybody.
I know. Me either.
I have no idea what that feels like.
Yeah, same.
Also have not first or second murdered anyone. Glad we have that on
For the record.
tape. For the record.
Just so that, like, nobody here has first or second murdered anyone. Or
Okay.
third, for that matter.
Whew. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I don't know. I think Bonnie, and then again, I believe that the episode title, Bonnie's, you know, quote about how she thinks that the lie is going to get them all, is kind of that same like telltale heart analogy of the narrator in the story, who it eventually gets to him.
Yeah, I think Bonnie would have, and I think she even said in the first episode that she would have been happier just telling
the truth.
The truth.
Yeah. Okay, now let's get to the Madeline, Martha, Mackenzie of it all, because
Oh, I love her.
everybody's life was pretty effed up this episode, including Madeline, who
Poor Madeline.
she starts out though, she gives an epic like shrug off to Mary Louise. I love how she was like, "What kind of emergency? The kind short people have."
That was also in the running for one of my favorite lines of the episode.
Yeah, the rude question, which, you know, also, Shandy, you could probably add this to the argument you were just making, where she asked Bonnie, "Are you on drugs?"
Yeah.
But I feel like Madeline would go up to anybody and ask them that, because she did offer Renata a Xanax later on in the episode too.
Well, I feel like just like Madeline's just like, here, drugs will solve all of our problems. Have an Ambien. Have a Xanax.
Exactly. Can we talk about drugs? Because, like, here's the thing. Like, Bonnie did kind of look like she was on drugs, and maybe that's the TV show making her look that way. But I think she's supposed to look tired and stressed.
And stressed, yeah. Like it was weighing on her, which it did.
It was weighing on her. But like you guys are saying, like, drugs are very much a part of Madeline's life. She just picked up her friend who drove a car and got in a car wreck because she was literally on drugs. Yeah. Okay, I don't care if it's a sleeping pill or whatever.
Which is why it was so funny that Madeline turns to her and she's like, "That woman is not right."
Exactly. I was like, that is the kettle calling the pot.
Pot calling kettle black.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Maybe an unfortunate choice of words, but yeah, that expression. Then she offers the Ambien the Xanax to Renata later on. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's like she's like swimming in drugs.
Well, what makes it worse is you literally just helped out your friend that got into an accident from sleeping pills, and you turn around and you offer Xanax to someone else that's having a hard time.
She was just trying to be a good friend.
Can you not reconcile this very dangerous, potentially awful thing?
She can't reconcile anything. Her whole life just fell apart because her one daughter blabbed to everybody else because she overheard her blabbing on the phone about the Ziggy's real father. And then her other daughter just casually was like, "Hey, you fucked the theater director last year, so don't talk to me about family or whatever."
Well, she's having a rough episode.
She had
It's all of Madeline's secrecy and penchant for lying came back to
bite her in the butt.
ass.
So, okay, we have the big, trouble with Madeline this episode, especially
Big Trouble with Little Madeline.
Big Trouble with Little Madeline.
was short Little Madeline.
Ed finding out that she had the affair. And I mean, which first of all, power to Adam Scott, because that was awesome when he walked down. She's like, "Where are you going?" And he's like, "To get my ears checked."
Oh my God, that was hilarious.
He's just so good. He's so good.
End of when he confronts her at the end, his hands are shaking in the scene.
I was going to say the same thing. Just no big deal, but I did act in a scene with him.
I can say from experience that he's a fabulous scene partner.
Shook his hand and it wasn't shaking at the time. Mine probably was.
Yeah, yours probably was. Maybe.
Hand?
Yeah, maybe.
Hand job?
He got the
Perfectly, like-
inspiration. He got the inspiration from you, Shandy, who's like, that girl that just shook my hand was nervous. I'm going to be nervous in this scene.
I'm gonna use this. Use it.
Yeah. No, he was phenomenal. But yeah, no, like the whole sequence was pretty great. And I was sort of wondering, like, because I knew that had to happen. And I was like, how is it going to happen? It was perfect. With
It was.
The daughter just like casually saying that and him overhearing.
Which, I mean, Madeline's daughters are totally little hers in that they can't keep their mouth shut about anything either.
Truth. But shout out to the editor for that final scene between Madeline and
Ed.
Ed. There's the Ed. The Ed of it all.
The Ed of it all.
That entire scene between the two of them, it's all done in close-ups. There's never one shot where you see both of them in frame together. And I think that was such a brilliant way to play that scene.
Because it showed that there was no us.
Right, that they were so completely separate and that, like, the lies and the secrecy had completely tore them apart.
So, yeah, agreed. Here's
Good.
I know. Here is the big debate that I was reading on the internet, some internet comments earlier, is Ed is very upset that first and foremost, he's upset that he was, that she was unfaithful to him. And I think that it's alluded to in the last episode of season 1 that he suspected it, but then when he was singing the Elvis song, he kind of, decided he was going to let it go. And then, Perry died. So that happened. And it kind of, I guess, eclipsed everything else. But so now he finds out for sure that this has happened. And then the other thing he's upset about is that she didn't tell him about
Jane
and Ziggy and Perry. Sorry. So the argument
this is my notes.
Okay. Do you want to start, because I am of 3 separate mindsets here, and I can't decide. They're all kind of I think equally. You always are. Go ahead.
He has every right to be upset about the cheating situation. But the 3 words that I wrote about the rape situation, Ed should understand, period. Like, let's not conflate Madeline choosing not to tell him about her best friend being raped because that was privileged information, and Madeline cheating on him and lying to him about that. That, like, he should understand. There are things like, I'm sorry, just because you're married, it doesn't mean that you have this, like, sort of relationship. I think we usually treat it like that, but, like, where you have this relationship where every single thing can be shared between each other. No, like, you still are your own unique being, and you have friendships. And if your female friend or male friend, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if your friend tells you that they were sexually assaulted and they do not want to share that information with other people, you do not have to share that with your spouse. Like, period, the end, he should understand that. That is a separate thing. That's, like, I like Ed. And I root for Ed. And I feel for Ed. But on that point, no.
Bit of a blind spot for Ed.
I totally agree with that.
I'm sorry. Like, no.
I totally agreed with that. And then the second time I watched it, now this was again after reading arguments back and forth all day. I watched it from the perspective of, what if it's not the fact that she didn't tell him a secret, either two. So one, he was upset that, Chloe knew about it because she was gossiping so loudly with everyone else, and he was hurt that for some reason he was the last to know, and it wasn't so much the fact that she didn't tell him the secret about being raped. It was that she had this whole other life because she wasn't treating it with the respect that it should have deserved. She was talking about it so loudly that Chloe could overhear it. That is one. 2 is... Shit, now I forgot the second one. And the second one is that it just represents to him that Madeline does not... He wants to be a part of Madeline's life, and it represented that he was... how far down the list of priorities she was, so that it was... Did I just say the same point twice? Whatever. I kind of watched it from that perspective too, that it wasn't what the secret was. It was that Ed was very hurt and angry that, she had been so cavalier about this information and didn't even think to connect with him, that their marriage has fallen apart so much that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. It doesn't matter if the secret was she hated roses. It was that she was keeping secrets and she was this gossip person who was just leaving him out of everything. Anyway, that was other perspectives to the scene and their marriage issues that I had read today that I thought that I would share, because, you can't refute what Shandy said. That is clearly, yeah.
Well, and I suppose if we did want to cut at a little bit of slack in the heat of the moment, when we are upset about something, we aren't our best selves, and perhaps upon some reflection, maybe he can come back and be like, oh, I've had some time to reflect about it. Given the nature of what the secret was and the information that you were protecting your friend, maybe he'll see things a little bit different.
Or maybe he'll be like, but dude, you really got to sit in your fucking closet and lock the door while you're telling these secrets, because you're not being very respectful either.
Like your children, your young children know this thing, and they really shouldn't. But I think the bigger point is a woman has been raped here, and there's a child that is the product of it, and not just because you're the spouse, you don't need to be privy to that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. A woman has been raped here, and yes, maybe she should have been a little bit more careful about what she was saying on the phone and where and when. But she's saying that on the phone in this really big house during the day when he's at work. And she doesn't necessarily know that her daughter's right next to her listening. And maybe she should have been paying more attention. I get that. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting point that he sort of is placing himself on the totem pole in a certain position. But I still do think that you should understand that.
And not in the need to know this secret position, but in the where I stand in Madeline's priority position. But guys, will someone just give Ed his moment? He just wants to have a moment, guys.
He does just want to have a moment. He's trying. Well, don't worry. His big scene with Shandy is coming.
It's coming up.
So he'll have his moment.
All right. So does anybody else have anything to add to the discussion portion? Otherwise, I think we have a little bit of feedback and local insight, music.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yep, no, all my notes have been covered.
Awesome. As far as feedback goes, we have some feedback from Facebook. And actually, Christy said what I was going to bring up, and I'm glad that I saw this because I didn't double say it. But the woman from the Trader Joe's that Ed ran into last week, the boob job woman, that's the wife of the guy that Madeline had the affair with.
Yeah. So first of all, this totally blew my mind. Second of all, it was definitely a Whole Foods, not a Trader Joe's, just saying. But of that, I am sure. But I sort of loved that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that totally blew my mind. All sorts of pieces.
Yep.
Yeah, and Matt thinks that she's out for a revenge affair.
Mm.
I mean, there were definitely theories after that scene of are they going to have an affair? And I think this maybe adds fuel to that fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, it did just feel like a very awkward, unnecessary scene.
Well, it was hysterical.
So it felt like just a big old blob of foreshadowing just dropped in the middle of a very well put together episode.
See, no, I thought that it was a hysterical scene, but now I'm glad that it had more of a purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that it was theater guy's wife. I think that's brilliant.
And if you have, it was. And if you have any feedback, we would love to hear it. You can send us an email, thebroadcasters3, the number 3, @gmail.com, or you can give us a phone call at 331-276-2373. Shandy, do you have any local insight for us?
So I already mentioned General Jim Moore, which is that big boulevard that Renata was driving down when she dropped off her husband on the side of the road.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And unceremoniously flipped him off. So the very opening scene, when Celeste gets in the accident.
Yes.
So first of all, in that scene, of course, watching with Tasia, and we're okay, where is this? I think it's 17 Mile Drive, which is Pebble Beach, which, side note, the U.S. Open was just here in Pebble Beach. But I'm fairly certain that that's where she was. So that was kind of fun to like watch and pick out. The other thing that didn't occur to me until about like 2 hours ago was when Frank and I were filming, the day that we were filming, it was like a whole day shoot, but we had a hard deadline towards sunset because they had to film a crash scene with Nicole Kidman.
Spoiler
and it didn't
alert.
even come back to me until a couple hours ago. I was like, oh, I mean, unless like spoiler alert, she gets in another car crash. Like, that's totally what they were filming.
Wow.
And it makes sense, like, in regards to like where we were and where they had to get to, and which is not that far away, but they still had to like, you know,
Right.
like a hard out. And like sunset, like dusk and dawn can have the same sort of light. So like with, you know.
Right. And that makes sense because Reese Witherspoon was at the crash scene and she was on set for you.
That is true. Yeah. So I thought that was really fun. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention was so you know, like, so after the car crash, and actually now I'm second guessing this. I will say it and then we can maybe workshop this. After the car crash, so Madeline and Celeste are in Madeline's car and they're driving along and they see Bonnie.
Yes.
And like just the place, like that whole scene, and I will grab a screenshot from HBO and compare it with some pictures that I took this afternoon, because I was like, okay, like I think I've been there before. I think that I've run there before. Just the way that it was like the street with like, did you notice the sidewalk, how it's like not really a trail, but not really like a, I probably didn't notice.
I actually, as a frequent walker, I actually did.
Okay. It's not like a traditional sidewalk, but it's also not a trail. Like it's paved, but it's like, like thinner. And anyway, I will post some pictures because I was like, I think I know exactly where this is. It's not too far from my place. And it's actually really close to where I've been geocaching lately. Just throwing that out there.
Nice. Awesome. We can talk more about that on the broadcast tomorrow.
Exactly. But anyway, I don't know how filming went, if they like filmed those scenes like all kind of together, because that place also kind of looks like 17 Mile Drive. So it's like, could it have been there? But I don't know if they have those walkways at 17 Mile Drive. I don't know. I'll have to go back and look. But I will post the pictures that I took this afternoon, because after work I was like, I need to go to that spot and take some pictures, see if I think it was really there, and then we'll compare screenshots and see if it looks like it. So you tell me, follow us at the Broadcasters 3 on Instagram. So
At the Broadcasters 3.
Let me know what you think.
Okay. Is that all?
And that's it.
Oh. Hold on.
That's all I got. Oh, there was also actually, you know what? This is not really exciting, but the hiking scene with Bonnie and her mom.
I think that's very exciting. I was actually hoping you would say where that was because it was so beautiful.
It was really beautiful. Tasia and I were like, that's a Big Sur, right? That looks like Big Sur. Tasia was like, yeah, it looks like, oh my God, what is it called? Julia Pfeiffer. So there's this place in Big Sur called Julia Pfeiffer, and every time I really have to think about it hard so that I don't say Michelle Pfeiffer.
Okay.
But, yeah, I think that very well could have been Big Sur. If it wasn't Big Sur, it might have been just north, because like it did look in episode 1, it looked like they filmed a little bit north of here. But there are those like sort of like coastal redwood type forests. Like that's very much what that looks like. And you have that in Big Sur, and then you have that a little bit north also. So
yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Shandy. Amanda, is there anything on the music front that is worth noting?
Yes. Yeah. So there's really only one big music thing. So I think we don't necessarily need to run down the soundtrack unless you guys are curious. We have another Sufjan Stevens reappearance this episode at the very end. The big final montage is Redford is the name of the song. So big Sufjan Stevens fans here on Big Little Lies. But the very particular interesting thing that, you know, I'm sure is all over the internet, the closing credits song. It is an Elvis cover, Wander of You. And if that sounds familiar to you, it is the song that Ed did during the trivia night gala back in season 1. But what I was reading that I found particularly interesting. The band that does this cover that was in the credits is a band called Villagers. And apparently they were asked to do this cover for season 1. So it's the same exact cover version of the Elvis song. So I thought that was particularly interesting and a really cool callback as you're sort of seeing the state of Madeline and Ed's relationship and where it's at current.
Yeah.
It's a nice little shout out.
Yeah, I like that. I think some of the others, do you want to talk about any of the other ones here do you think might be worth noting, like foreshadowing or anything?
I don't think any of them are foreshadowing so much. I think they're just really great uses of song. Like I think the scene where Bonnie and Jane are doing yoga and when Bonnie's mom shows up, that song is called Let Love Stand a Chance. It's by Charles Bradley featuring Menhan Street Band. And I just thought it was just the transition of it, the use of it, the vibe of the song, I thought really helped tell the scene. In general, I feel like their use of more sort of throwback, kind of doo-woppy soul R&B type tracks, I think are really an interesting choice, given how white the show is, to kind of bring in more urban, quote unquote, styles of music. I think is an interesting choice, and I think it certainly adds to the scenes.
I think it's interesting that the song that played during Celeste and Perry's flashback as Mary Louise is confronting him is called Somewhere Not Here, because Celeste is clearly not all here these days. And then an Elle King song called Good Thing Gone is in the background when Ed walks in on them talking about the affair, because a good thing's about to be gone. But yeah. So, as always, the music in this show is awesome. But I think that about wraps it up for us this week. Thank you guys for listening. If you have any feedback, we would love to hear from you. The broadcasters3@gmail.com, 331-276-2373. Please subscribe to us, however you get your podcasts, to our individual feed. And if you can leave us a review, that would be very helpful and awesome. And tell your friends about us. We're fun. And if you really like us and you don't listen to the broadcast already, hop on over to our other show, The Broadcast, with Amanda, Shandy, and Colleen, because we are there and we curse a lot more and we do a lot of That's What She Said jokes. And we talk about current events and we take dumb BuzzFeed quizzes. And, we're pretty fun. We're like Girls Night right? Girls Night in podcast form. That's how we've been described.
That's right. And we talk about geocaching.
We talk about geocaching. We talk about politics. We talk about lots of things. So if you are interested in that, check us out. If you want to hear what we had to say about season 1, check that out on the feed as well. And as always, thank you to our patrons. If you'd like to become a patron, patreon.com/JandJack. And that's because we're part of the Jay and Jack network. And as always, special thank you to the patrons that contribute at a certain level. And that would be Eckhart Rickner, Ed the Creepy Mailman, Tack from Tokyo, Joanne with a Plan, Maggie the Magnificent, and Drake the Distributor. Thank you guys, as always. And I guess we will see you next week. We may or may not have a special guest joining us next week, so stay tuned for that. Yay! All right, on that note, my name is Colleen.
My name is Amanda.
And I'm Shandy.
Peace out, everybody. Bye.
See you next week.